Welcome back. Today we're diving into something really critical unfolding in the Middle East, a high-stakes situation. We're seeing two major regional players, Iran and Israel, locked in this struggle it's just shifted dramatically.
Yeah, you really have.
It feels like it's moved right out of the shadows and into a direct, overt confrontation.
That's exactly right.
And this isn't just about, the latest headlines. It feels like the culmination of decades of rivalry, ideology, this relentless regional chess game.
Absolutely. What we're witnessing right now, these are intense direct attacks. They've truly reshaped the landscape. It's gone way beyond the sort of traditional shadow war we've been seeing.
Right.
I mean, we saw Israel's Operation Rising Lion. That was a series of, frankly, unprecedented deep strikes, for the first time openly targeting command centers that were previously considered off limits.
Wow. Okay.
And then the response, Iran launching Operation True Promise 3. Coordinated barrage, ballistic missiles aimed at Israeli cities. That was the largest direct assault of its kind ever.
So for you listening, the stakes here, the immediate risks, they're very real. We could be looking at a regional explosion of conflict, serious disruption to global energy markets, I imagine, and the potential for, wider international involvement, pulling other countries in.
It's a serious concern.
So in this deep dive, we really want to unpack how we got here, what's really happening on all these different fronts, military, cyber, economic, and crucially, what it all means for you and for the world.
Yeah, it's a vital context.
To really understand the powder keg we're dealing with, we need to rewind a bit, don't we? Because this didn't just happen overnight.
Not at all. There's a deep history here.
Yeah, like when we talk about Iran and Israel today, you automatically think enemies, right? Adversaries.
It's the default assumption.
But here's a twist, isn't it? Before 1979, Iran, under the Shah, they were actually a quiet, strategic ally of Israel.
It seems strange now, but yes, they found common ground, not exactly friendship, but pragmatic necessity, a shared interest against that wave of Arab nationalism that was sweeping the region back then.
A relationship people often forget.
Completely overlooked, often. But it's a stark contrast to today, isn't it?
Totally.
The 1979 Islamic Revolution just fundamentally changed everything for Iran's foreign policy.
Right, the whole game changed.
It adopted this unyielding anti-Israel stance, rooted really deeply in ideology, opposition to what they called a Zionist entity.
And strong support for Palestinian causes became central too.
Absolutely. A cornerstone of their new revolutionary foreign policy, became a key part of their identity on the world stage.
Okay, so this brings us to something that always sparks intense debate. The nuclear question.
The big one.
Israel's view of Iran's nuclear program. They've long framed it as an existential threat. But how much of that framing is, let's say, strategic positioning versus immediate, tangible danger? Especially now after the U.S. left the JCPOA.
Right, the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah, the JCPOA. And with Iran enriching uranium to higher and higher levels, where's the line?
That's a really crucial distinction to try and make. From Israel's perspective, any Iranian progress towards nuclear capability, even if Iran claims it's for peaceful enrichment, is seen as a direct threat.
Why? Because of the rhetoric.
Exactly. Because of Iran's hostile rhetoric, its stated aims regarding Israel. The concern isn't just about Iran having a weapon tomorrow. It's about them having the ability to quickly build one, becoming a threshold state.
Ah, okay. The potential.
Yes. And that belief, that fear, has been a key driver, maybe the key driver, of many of Israel's actions, both preemptive and reactive.
So turning to Iran's strategy, they project power using this network they call the axis of resistance. Sounds formidable, but how effective is it really on the ground? What makes it tick?
Well, what's fascinating, I think, is how it functions. It's not just a list of armed groups, it's more of a decentralized network, which gives Iran a degree of deniability while still allowing it to project power. And it makes direct retaliation incredibly complex for Israel.
So who are the key players in this axis?
Well, you have Hezbollah in Lebanon. They're arguably Iran's most potent proxy, huge missile arsenal. And they've been significantly impacted by recent Israeli actions in this wider conflict.
Right.
Then there's Hamas in Gaza. Iran's support there is critical, and it directly links the terrible situation in Gaza to this larger Iran-Israel dynamic. Further south, you've got the Houthi rebels in Yemen. They've recently started striking Israeli targets, which really signals a broader regional coordination, perhaps.
Yeah, that was a notable expansion.
Definitely. And we should forget the Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. They extend Iranian influence and are often used to pressure U.S. forces stationed in the region.
So, flipping the coin, Israel's counter strategy. You mentioned degrading Iran's influence, targeting proxies, covert ops. But is it actually working? I mean, is there solid evidence this degradation strategy is succeeding? Or is Iran just adapting, maybe even being provoked into more direct confrontation like we're seeing now?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Israel's definitely shifted gears, moving from containment to what they call overt strategic degradation.
All right.
Using everything from Mossad missions to advanced drone bases. It's certainly putting pressure on the axis, no doubt.
Right.
But it inherently carries this huge risk of unintended escalation, miscalculation. And Iran, time and again, has shown this remarkable capacity for resilience, for adaptation. So it feels less like a quick knockout punch is possible and more like a long-term, evolving, dangerous chess match.
Okay, so beyond the physical battlefield, the rockets, the proxies, there's this whole other war, isn't there? The unseen one in cyberspace.
Oh, absolutely, a critical front.
People often talk about Israel being a cyber superpower. What does that actually mean in practice against Iran? And what's Iran bringing to the table in response?
It really is a digital arms race. Israel's cyber capabilities are genuinely world-class. They can do everything from sophisticated intelligence gathering to direct destruction of critical infrastructure.
But Iran's not just sitting back.
No, not at all. Iran has been steadily and significantly increasing its focus on cyber espionage and, importantly, disruptive capabilities. We've seen this play out in real time.
Like what? Any examples?
Well, there were recent reports of Iranian attempts to hijack Israeli home security cameras for intelligence gathering, presumably.
Wow, really? Home cameras?
Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, you have Israeli hacking groups reportedly targeting Iranian financial institutions. And there have been claims, often hard to verify definitively, but claims of full-scale cyber attacks on critical infrastructure in both countries. Water, electricity grids, things like that.
And this cyber conflict isn't new, right? I seem to remember Stuxnet being a huge deal years ago. Can you remind us why that was such a landmark moment?
Ah, yes, the Stuxnet legacy. It was absolutely a landmark. That attack, believed to be a joint U.S.-Israeli effort against Iran's nuclear program.
It targeted their centrifuges.
Precisely. It didn't just damage the centrifuges physically, it fundamentally changed the whole calculus of international conflict. It proved, really for the first time so publicly, that non-kinetic attacks, cyber attacks, could achieve major strategic objectives with devastating precision.
So it opened the door.
It basically ushered in this era where cyber warfare is seen as a legitimate, albeit shadowy battlefield, set the stage for much of what we see today.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit, maybe inward. What about the internal pressures on both governments? How does that factor into their actions?
It's hugely significant. Internally, both regimes face immense pressures.
Yeah.
For Israel, you have the Netanyahu government under enormous strain.
To maintain public confidence?
Yes, maintain public confidence, project a strong security image, especially with the economy feeling the pinch from very high military spending.
Then they've used some strong language, haven't they?
Extremely strong. That articulated objective to prevent Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's existence. I mean, that shows the incredibly high stakes they feel are involved. It's a statement of ultimate, perhaps maximalist intent.
And on the Iranian side, they're dealing with external threats, but also significant internal dissent, right?
Absolutely. The Iranian leadership is constantly balancing these external threats with managing internal discontent. It's a tough balancing act.
So the conflict could be used domestically.
Well, yes, ironically, the conflict with Israel might be used by the regime to justify cracking down internally, tightening its grip, rallying nationalist sentiment.
But it's a double-edged sword.
Completely.
Look.
It also risks worsening their already struggling economy, which could in turn potentially spark wider unrest. You know, the recent appointment of Brigadier General Mohammad Karami to head the IRGC ground forces.
The Revolutionary Guard?
Yes. Some analysts see that as suggesting a real concern within the regime about internal stability and maintaining control, preparing for potential challenges from within.
Interesting detail. And while all this internal pressure is happening, there's always the shadow of external powers, particularly the U.S.
Always. The U.S. role is pivotal, even when it tries not to be directly involved. President Trump, for example, during his term, showed what some called significant caution.
Meaning reluctance to get drawn in militarily.
Exactly. A reluctance to authorize direct U.S. military involvement, reportedly rooted in fears of creating another Libya, another destabilizing intervention,
Yeah.
and also maybe a desire to keep channels open for potential negotiations down the line.
So even military options were limited.
The focus, when military options were discussed, often seemed to be on very limited strikes. The bunker buster option, for instance, targeting specific hardened facilities. It highlighted a preference for specific contained objectives rather than any kind of broader engagement.
Okay, so this conflict isn't just military or cyber. It hits the global economy. It hits international law, directly impacting, well, potentially everyone listening.
The ripple effects are huge.
Let's talk energy security first. The impact on oil prices, shipping, especially that choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. Remind us why that narrow bit of water is so critical.
The Strait of Hormuz is, simply put, the world's most critical oil choke point. Roughly a fifth, maybe even more some days, of the world's total oil consumption passes right through it. Every single day.
So any disruption
there, even just the threat of disruption, sends global oil prices soaring almost immediately. Now, Iran could try to use this as leverage.
But it hurt them too.
Oh, massively. It would cause significant self-inflicted damage to their own economy. They rely on those same shipping lanes for their own exports and imports. It's a very dangerous game for them to play, a real double-edged sword.
And it's not just oil, is it? This instability affects broader supply chains, things coming from Asia.
Absolutely. It ripples through global trade, and it even threatens emerging projects like this Silicon Road economic corridor idea in the Middle East.
Silicon Road.
Yeah, trying to build tech and trade links. It's been attracting quite a bit of investment from Asian and European firms, but any sense of major insecurity in the region puts all of that directly in jeopardy. Investment dries up fast when missiles start flying.
Okay, and then there's the whole legal minefield. International law, legitimacy. How do they even justify these actions?
Well, it gets very complex very quickly. Israel often cites Article 51 of the UN Charter, the right to self-defense.
Right.
Particularly invoking this idea of anticipatory self-defense against what it frames as an existential nuclear threat from Iran, acting before an attack happens, essentially.
But that's controversial, legally speaking.
Highly controversial. Many international legal experts critique this. They argue that Israel's initial strikes might be seen as unlawful if there wasn't an imminent armed attack underway. There's this really tricky distinction in international law between an armed attack having occurred or being imminent versus a broader armed conflict existing. The definitions matter hugely.
And how do you de-escalate when interpretations are so different?
Exactly. That's the core of the diplomatic problem. It leads to these maximalist demands we see. Iran insisting on its right to peaceful nuclear energy under international treaties, while others demand complete nuclear dismantlement. It creates this huge diplomatic gap, a Grand Canyon almost, that seems impossible to bridge right now.
And that's before we even get into humanitarian law concerns.
Right. There are serious allegations regarding violations of international humanitarian law, the laws of war. Targeting civilian areas, as Iran is accused of, or targeting near sensitive sites like hospitals, which both sides have accused each other of. These are grave concerns.
So looking ahead, what are the potential paths forward? The most likely scenario seems to be this kind of controlled escalation, right? Tit for tat.
That seems to be the default pattern, yes, at least in the immediate term. Controlled escalation. But, and this is a huge but, we absolutely have to stress the inherent massive risks of miscalculation.
One mistake.
One mistake, one misinterpreted signal, one strike going slightly wrong, and things could spiral completely out of control, far beyond what either side initially intended.
And internally, does this conflict ultimately strengthen or weaken the Iranian regime? What's the thinking there?
That's a really interesting debate. External pressure can sometimes create a rally around the flag effect, strengthening a regime's grip, at least temporarily.
But not always.
Not always. The general consensus among many analysts is that the probability of outright regime collapse, just due to this external pressure alone, is relatively low. The Iranian regime has proven quite adept over the years at managing perceived threats to shore up internal support, or at least suppress dissent.
Then there's the ultimate fear multiplier, the nuclear brink. What if Iran actually threatens to leave the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty?
That would be a game changer. A massive escalation. The NPT is the cornerstone of global efforts to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons.
So if Iran leaves?
If Iran were to leave, or even credibly threaten to leave, and then move rapidly towards becoming a nuclear threshold state, meaning it has everything ready to build a weapon very quickly that fundamentally changes the entire geopolitical calculus, not just for the Middle East, but globally.
A terrifying prospect.
Deeply worrying.
And what about the other players in the region? The Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, how are they navigating this? They have their own history with Iran.
Right, they have deep historical tensions with Iran, but right now their primary focus seems to be on de-escalation.
Why? Economics?
Largely, yes. Their economies are very vulnerable to regional instability. They've invested heavily in diversifying away from oil, in tourism, and global business. A major conflict would devastate those plans.
So they're hedging their bets, not just relying on the U.S.
Exactly. We're seeing a clear shift. They're still U.S. partners, but they're increasingly seeking regional stability on their own terms, engaging diplomatically even with rivals like Iran, and generally moving away from sole reliance on U.S. security guarantees. They want more control over their own neighborhood stability.
Okay, so pulling it all together, this conflict clearly has enormous long-term implications for alliances in the Middle East, for global security structures, for the future of non-proliferation. What are the big takeaways here?
Well, I think what becomes undeniable when you really dig into it, when you peel back all these layers, is just how intricately everything is connected.
Yeah.
You've got history, ideology, hard military strategy, these invisible digital battles, the huge economic fallout, and then these complex, often conflicting legal justifications. It's truly a multifaceted conflict.
Each piece influencing the others.
Exactly. In this incredibly dangerous dance. It's fascinating in a very grim way, how all these layers intertwine and feed off each other.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels like the overwhelming takeaway is the urgent, desperate need for some kind of international diplomatic effort to prevent catastrophic escalation.
Absolutely critical, though incredibly difficult.
Because the grievances on both sides, they run so deep, the strategic objectives seem almost irreconcilable. It makes finding a path to lasting peace seem, well, incredibly elusive right now.
It does.
So the world basically holds its breath, watching as these two adversaries, both deeply convinced of the rightness of their path, walk this tightrope over a geopolitical chasm.
And global stability is genuinely hanging in the balance.
It's an incredibly complex, fast-moving situation. We hope this deep dive has given you, our listeners, a clearer picture, some necessary context to continue your own thinking and exploration on this critical issue.